Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to the lecture Performing Database Attacks. The outline of this lecture is defining DBMS, database attacks, testing database vulnerabilities, SQL injection, and tools for doing brute force attack, securing SQL server, detecting database attacks, and protection against database attacks. Let us discuss the basic terminologies. SQL, Structured Query Language, is a standard language for accessing and manipulating databases. So in the introduction to database, you would have studied the SQL statements, DDL, DML statements. Okay, so example, if you want to create a database schema in the database management system, we can use a SQL statement to create the schema. Then using the schema, we can create tables, any number of tables. Then we can insert the data into the tables. We can update the data. We can select the data from the table, etc. So this is the main purpose of the SQL statement. So this is a MySQL. Okay, so when we want to connect to the MySQL database system through this workbench, okay, so we have to specify the IP address in which the service is running, the port number, username, okay, and of course the password. So here there is a schema, user, then select asterisk from schema use HRMS, then select asterisk from user table. So this is an example of SQL statement. So the user data are displayed here. PHP stands for PHP hypertext, stands for hypertext preprocessor, and it is a widely used server-side scripting language. So if one wants to develop a web application, a dynamic web application, then server-side programming tools such as PHP, ASP, JSF, JSP, these server-side programming tools can be used. So organizations, they have large data to be stored about the employees, about the transactions, about their business activities, about the inventory, stock, about the human resource, etc. So they might be using one or more database, and they use relational database systems, non-relational database systems such as Oracle, MySQL, PostgreSQL, MongoDB, etc., MongoDB, etc. So here, when the organizations use database systems, they use security mechanisms such as intrusion detection system or intrusion prevention system or firewall to protect any network attacks against the database system, and also physical securities would be in place. But this security mechanisms is not enough actually. we need some more protections in order to protect the database systems from various security threats, which we would be discussing in the later slides. So the database systems, they interface with applications, web applications or mobile applications, and web services. Okay, so the web applications can be internet based or intranet based, etc. So there is every chance, the attacks to be initiated against the database system through these applications. If these applications they have some vulnerabilities, then through these vulnerabilities the attack can be achieved. So let us discuss the basics of RDBMS. RDBMS stands for Relational Database Management Systems. In relational database management system, data is stored in several tables. Okay, so you all know that in the RDBMS we have to create, we can create schemas, databases, and inside each and every database we can create any number of tables, and we can create a relationship among the tables, and we can perform a normalization, we can reduce the redundancies. Okay, the earlier they were using single flat table which has lot of redundancies. Okay, so in table we can store data, different types of data. Each table would be representing a specific entity, like employee, stock, like qualifications, etc., like that, address, etc. So RDBMS, the basic purpose of the RDBMS is to store the data, huge amount of data, and we can retrieve the data, we can update the data. Okay, so the basic purpose of the database management system is to store, retrieve, and update the data. Examples of database systems are Oracle, MySQL, PostgreSQL, SQL Server. So Oracle is from the organization Oracle, and basically some RDBMS tools are open source, and this Oracle is a vendor based. SQL Server is from the Microsoft organization. So this MySQL and this SQL Server are different. Okay, so in MySQL we have the community edition, which we can use for freely. Database attacks when a successful database attack is achieved, the databases are susceptible to attacks for several reasons. So the data attacks can be done by the attacker or adversaries to steal the data from the database system. They want to steal the data about the customers, about their usernames, passwords, about their bank balances, okay, about their social security details, medical records. So some attacks main focus is to steal the data, data theft. So when data theft is when the data theft happens, the data is compromised, the data is accessed by unauthorized people, the confidentiality or the privacy of the data is compromised. Okay, so this is very important that such attacks okay doesn't happen. Next is data manipulation. So the attacker can get into the database system without permission, and the attacker can update the data in the database system. Example like boosting the bank balance, etc. Then the attacker can sometimes delete the data, then he can you know, update the data in a inconsistent way, or okay, so that the service is not available. So these things can make the service not available. Okay, so it belongs to the category of attack called denial of service. So if some database systems, if they are closely integrated with the operating system, web server, example let's say Microsoft SQL Server, and then you have the Windows operating system, then you have IIS web server. They are closely related to each other, since they are all from same vendors. So they interact with each other in a very tightly, sometimes more tightly coupled way than other systems. So if there is a vulnerability in the database systems, through that the attacker can exploit the operating system, and as well as the web servers, etc. So this can lead to something called system level exploitation. So that here the databases, the vulnerabilities in the databases allow the attackers to make the database as a backdoor to get into the other systems on a network. Example, SQL Server offer server routes for the hacker, not only to compromise the database, but also to gain the administrative access to the server, and ultimately to the whole network. These are some of the database system, and their default account details are given. For example, here when we get into this, the default user account with administrator privilege is root actually. So when you install the database systems, so you have to give the new password during the installation process. And Microsoft SQL Server, the default user account is SA. Oracle sys, and or systems, sys or system. So during the installation time you have to change the default passwords, but in the case of MySQL and the Microsoft SQL Server, you have to give the password. There won't be any default password just like that. You have to give the password during the installation process. So now the SQL ping is a tool actually. It can scan specific range of IP addresses, looking for an open UDP port actually. So in any network, if you can use the SQL ping to detect the available database systems, it would use the UDP port in order to detect the available database systems. Now let us discuss about the SQL injection. So SQL injection is a type of attack in which SQL statements are altered, or the payloads are attached with the SQL statement that the web application is trying to send to the database. So whenever we want to log in into any web applications, initially authentication process would be done. So we have to give the username, our credentials. So in the place where we have to enter the credentials, we can give some payload such that the SQL statement which is submitted to the database is manipulated, and that results in the SQL injection attack. SQL injection is a use of structured query language to gain unauthorized access to the database, and it is most common type of injection attacks. So web applications, they use the backend databases to store the data and to retrieve the data. And if the web applications are not designed in a secured way, if no proper testing mechanism is done to find out the vulnerabilities in the web application, then through these vulnerabilities the attacker can easily perform the SQL injection attack. So the SQL injection attack is actually can do a lot of damage to the organization or to an individual. The privacy of the data can be compromised, the data can be lost, the data can be modified. So what is the scope of the SQL injection? Through the SQL injection, through a successful SQL injection, the authentication process can be bypassed. So if you have to enter the username and password, if the attacker doesn't know the username and password, he can inject proper payload, so that in the credential form he can inject the malicious payloads so that the authentication process can be bypassed. And also through the SQL injection, the attacker can find out the data from the database system. The data can be stolen and the integrity of the data can be compromised. The data can be modified. Example like bank balance amount can be modified, loan amount can be modified, etc. And medical records can be manipulated. Or the database system, the data can be deleted. And through the database system vulnerabilities, the code in the server, database systems are deployed in some servers, right? So through the vulnerabilities in the database system, the code in the server can be executed that could compromise the security of the server as well as the entire network. So this is called remote code execution. Now let us discuss about the different types of SQL injection. In the first type of SQL injection, the first type of SQL injection is called in-band SQL injection. In the in-band execution, same technique is used for both attack and the result. Example, now let us see some examples. Actually, I will show some examples. The attacker would use the HTTP GET method and use the POST method in order to initiate the attack and to get the response from the web server. I mean database server actually. So this is the common type of SQL injection. Common two types of in-band SQL injections are error-based and union-based. In the error-based SQL injection technique, the attacker would inject payload into the web application query so that the SQL statement submitted to the database is manipulated, is changed in such a way that the database system would be revealing some sensitive error messages back to the client system. That would be displayed on the client system. So in the error based in-band SQL injection, the attacker relies on error messages from the database server to reveal the information about the structure of the database. Okay, now let me explain with some examples. This URL actually we can use for practicing the ethical hacking, actually SQL injection. In the error based in-band SQL injection, the attacker would inject the payload in the SQL statement that are forwarded through the web application into the database, and it would trigger the database to respond with some error message. If that error message is not handled properly by the web application, then that error message would be displayed on the client side, and it would reveal a lot of information about the database system, about the structure of the database, then the database data stored in the database. So that is called error based in-band SQL injection. For learning ethical hacking concepts, you can use this website. Sometimes it won't be working, but sometimes you can see that this particular website is working. Currently it's not working, that's why I am not trying that in the browser. However, previously I have tried this URL to perform the SQL injection for educational purpose. So in this example, actually this is the URL. This URL would list the products. When you access this application, and when you call this particular when you try to list the products of category 1, so it would display all the products which belong to the category 1. Okay, so this is how this particular URL functions. If you attach the single quotes like this here, single quotes like this at the end, and when you send the request to the web application, web server, you can see an error message is displayed here. So basically this error message says MySQL fetch array expects parameter 1 to be resource boolean given. Okay, so from this error message is not properly handled by the web server, the application which is deployed in the web server. and since it is not properly handled, since it is not filtered, it is displayed in the client side. So the adversary is able to get some information about the database. Now it's clear that the database system what is used is MySQL. So this is how you attach a payload into the request which you send to the web application. That would trigger the database to give some error message, and through that error message we can find the information about the system. Then the URL is modified little bit. Display the artist equal to 1 and order by 4 minus 1. So what happens, it would again enter the return error message. Basically there are in the artist table there are no 4 columns. So now here you see when you change the value from 4 to 3, okay, there is no error message. So now we use this particular statement using the union in order to find the number of rows basically in a specific table. So this is a simple example which shows what is error based SQL injection. And now in Kali Linux we have a tool called SQL map. Okay, in the URL you can enter SQL map, and you can enter that application SQL map. In the SQL map you can enter the URL of the website, okay, about which you want to which you want to perform the SQL injection. So let's say already we know this is the vulnerable website which as a student for the educational purpose we are allowed to use this site to practice the SQL injection. Okay, so I am typing here SQL map. Okay, then this is URL. So list the products. Okay, category is equal to 1. Then dash db. So here this particular command, once it is confirmed, how we confirm actually, how we confirm is like you have your website here, URL. At the end I put a quote, single quotes, and then it returns an error message. It's not filtering. It means this particular website is vulnerable to SQL injection. Then I go into the Kali. I open the SQL map program. Just type SQL map, and in that I enter the URL. Okay, then I put dash db and execute the command. It would execute like this, and it would inform us the name of the database. There are two databases available. Example, accurate, AccuArt, and information underscore schema. These are the two databases available. So this is the command, SQL map space URL space dash db to know the database. Okay, so basically second one is we want to know the tables in that particular database. For example, this is the database. Let me repeat, I can do it in the Kali now, but the thing is this particular link is not responding at this moment of time. Okay, so when I practiced yesterday it was working fine. So maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow, You can try with this link. So next what I do is I want to know, this is the database name. So from this database I want to know the tables. So SQL map, okay, the URL, okay, so this is the URL what we have. Then I put dash D, then I enter the name of the database which we have found now through the previous using the previous command, then dash tables. So what it does, this command does, is that it would find what are the different tables that exist inside this database. Okay, so this is the command. So now it has displayed all the tables like artists, cards, catalog, featured, users. Okay, so now we are very much interested in one particular table, that is called users, because it would have the credentials. Okay, so SQL map, the URL of that website, then -d, then the name of the dash D, the name of the database, then dash T, name of the table is users. Just now we found the list of tables, right? So from that we are interested in the table users, -t users. Okay, then I want to know the columns, so dash dash columns, no, single dash, the finally single dash columns. So it would display the columns in the users table, address, cart, and you can see that uname and pass, these two fields are available, which is very much important, username and password. So now next command is SQL map space the URL of that website, then name of the database dash D, the name of the database, dash T, the name of the table, dash C, the name of the columns what we want, about which the information we want, username and password, then dash dump, dash dump. Okay, so dash dump. So what it does, it reveals the username and the password of a particular user. Now we got the username and password. So this is a sample example. Basically it allows us to perform the SQL injection. Through this SQL injections we were able to know the name of the database management system. Okay, so the name of the database management system, then database names, then table names, then columns, then the values in the particular fields. Okay, username and password. So you know, error based basically SQL injection allows the adversary to know the basic details about the database system through the error messages that are responded by the database system through the web application. Union based, basically it belongs to the in-band SQL injection category. The thing is, one or more SQL statements can be combined using the union operator. Okay, so this is one SQL statement and this is another SQL statement, and both can be combined using the union operator. So set of select statements are combined using the union operator is used as the payload to inject into the it is used as a payload to inject into the database system through the web application. Okay. I can show one example here. So here this is the command. Okay, so this is a basically artist equal to this -1 and union select. So here two basically disjoint statements are combined using the union operator. Next one is called inferential blind SQL injection. Another type of SQL injection is blind SQL injection or inferential SQL injection. In the earlier example, we saw that in the error-based SQL injection, the adversary is able to find information about the database system from the error messages that is returned by the database system through the web application. But sometimes in the web application there would be web application would be vulnerable to the SQL injection, but it would not return the error messages. However, the SQL injection vulnerability still exists, and the error message basically the pages that return the error message are filtered. So in that circumstances, when the adversary is not able to read the error messages explicitly, then the attacker would go into another mode of injection, another type of injection, that is called blind SQL injection. In the blind SQL injection, basically the attacker would send the payload that would be embedded in the SQL statement, and it would make the web application respond in a true or false fashion. Maybe it would give two types of response. Basically, if the payload that is sent to the web application, if it produces a true condition in the database level, the web application would be returning a specific page, example welcome page. If the payload produces a false condition in the database level, then the web application would be responding with another set of page. Maybe the welcome page is not displayed. So from this behavior of the web application, example, the welcome page is displayed for a specific set of payload injected, and the welcome page not displayed for a false basically a false type of condition. So from this behavior, the user, the attacker, is able to observe the behavior of the database system. He can manipulate this behavior to find the informations. He can guess the password details, etc. That belongs to the category called Boolean based blind SQL injections. So force the database to return different result depending on whether it is a true or false result. Let me explain with one example. Let's say the web application is reading a cookie data from the client system, and basically it would be sending a request to the web application and that request would be, let's say, would generate a SQL statement like this at the database level. Select track ID from, this is the table name, where let's say track ID is equal to this value. Let's say this value is found in the client machine. Just checking, whether this user is a known user, okay, whether this user has visited this website earlier or not. To determine that, basically this SQL statement is generated at the database level. Suppose if the user is known, let's say if this this tracking ID of the cookie is already available in this table, let's say, then it would return welcome page, welcome. Suppose if it is not available, let's say that it would not return any welcome page. So this behavior is enough for a hacker to manipulate the blind SQL injection. So let's say the attacker wants to know the password. Let's say in the database system there is a table called users, let us assume, okay, just assumption. Let's say the attacker is guessing that there is a table users, okay, and in that users table, let's say there is a field username and another field password. So the attacker wants to guess the password using the blind SQL injection. So this is the payload that he or she, that attacker, is injecting into the database system through the web application. So it says select from users, where username is administrator and the substring. So what is the essence of this command is that it is just checking whether the first letter of the password is it greater than M or not. So that's the essence of this particular command. Okay, through the blind injection, the attacker wants to know whether the first letter of the password is it greater than M. Okay, suppose if it is greater than M, if it is true, maybe it would return the welcome page. The application would return the welcome page, but please be careful here, the error message is not returned. Just the behavior of the web application is different actually. If the condition is true, it is returning a specific page. Let's assume welcome page. Here it is another payload is sent. This payload just checks whether the password first letter is it greater than T. Suppose if it is a false, maybe the welcome page is not displayed. So when the condition is true, a specific page is displayed. When the condition is false, another page is displayed. So from this behavior, the hacker is able to find whether the payload the attacker has injected, whether it is producing the true condition or false condition. So using this guessing methodology, the user can predict the password, let's say the password of administrator, let's say, as far as this example is concerned. So this attack is called blind SQL injection using true Boolean based methodology. Another one is called time based inferential or blind SQL injection. So this injection, what it does is it would force the database to give the response to it would make the database wait for a specific amount of time before it responds. So from this actually behavior, the adversary is able to understand whether the result of the query is true or false. Okay, so let me give one example. The adversary here, what he is doing, the same example which I gave before for the blind SQL injection using the Boolean type. So here this is the payload which is injected. Okay, so it says from the user table there is a field username, and it says, the statement says whether this first letter of the password, is it greater than M? If it is greater than M, okay, then the statement says it is requesting the database to delay for some amount of time. If the condition is true, okay, this SQL statement is asking the database to delay for specific amount of time. So if there is a response, if there is a delay in response from the database system to the client machine, to the client browser through the web application, if there is a delay, that means this particular condition is true. This condition is telling it is just SQL statement. It is checking whether the first letter of the password, okay, of the administrator in the user table, is it greater than the letter M? If it is true, wait, delay. Okay, delay should happen if the condition is true. Suppose if there is no delay in response, if the response is coming quickly, actually there will not be any message displayed in the client side. I mean, a specific page is displayed immediately, responded, but there is no content displayed in the message. Please understand, there is no error message. But if the response is very quick, that means this wait condition is not executed. That means the condition is false. So blind SQL injection using the time-based technique, what it does is it will test a specific SQL statement, okay, and if that condition is okay, to know whether that condition is true or not, it will make some amount of delay. Okay, so all the database systems, there are delay methods available. When you call that procedure or function, okay, delay function or procedure, what happens, some amount of time is delayed. In Java, for example, sleep method. Okay, so we can make the program or thread process sleep for a specific amount of time. Similarly, we can make the database system delay the response for specific amount of time. So when this condition is true, this would be invoked, this part would be invoked. If condition, if the condition is true, the statement would be executed. If the condition is false, then the statement will not be executed. So if the condition is true, that implies that that would be confirmed by the delay in the response. Suppose if the condition is false, there will not be any delay. So from that, the attacker can guess the password of a particular user from the table. Okay, so this is called blind SQL injection using the time-based technique. Next type of SQL injection is out of band SQL injection. It's opposite to in band, which we have discussed here. In band means error based and union based. So here it uses different communication channel for the attack and results. Let me explain what is meant by different communication channel. This is not a common type of attack, and it is difficult to perform. It requires some features to be enabled on the database server, such as DNS or HTTP request. So let me explain this with a tool called Burp Suite. So what is this attack? Let me say, there is a tool available that is called burp suit, which we can use to initiate this, to detect the vulnerability of the web application, whether it is vulnerable to this attack or not. We can find whether a particular web application is vulnerable to out of band SQL injection or not. That can be detected using this tool, burp suit. So using this tool, basically we can create a payload. Okay, so this is the tool, burp tool. So using that we can generate a payload. So copy the payload and send the payload to the web application. You have to inject that payload into the web application. So how to inject, you can just go through the burp suit tutorial and find how this can be done exactly. It's not a big task. Everything can be done using these tools. So basically you are sending a payload into the application. So the payload basically would be looking like this. You know, everyone, what is a domain name? Okay, for example, google.com, okay, yahoo.com, cas.edu.om. so these are the domain names, right? So now basically the payload would have a domain name, and that, okay, that domain name is basically generated using this tool. Okay, using this tool we can create a domain name. Okay, that domain name would be sent as a payload into this web application. So whenever, please understand, any application receives a domain name, it would try to perform the DNS lookup. What is DNS lookup? It would try to find what is the IP address of the particular domain name, right? If that is enabled in the web application, if the DNS lookup is allowed, then the application would, for example, let's say a1.abc.com. so that is a domain name, let's say, that is part of the payload, a1.abc.com. when this goes to this application, it would try to resolve, it would send a request basically to the DNS servers. You know, DNS server has a hierarchical architecture. So basically any DNS domain name which we create using this tool basically would be resolved. It would actually, this would support a DNS server. So any domain name that is generated by this particular tool would be resolved by the DNS server that is supported by this organization. Okay, so this organization would be having a DNS server. So it would resolve all the domain name that is generated by this tool. So basically, finally, the DNS lookup request would be coming to this burp collaborator. It would ask, okay, a1.abc.com is the domain name. Okay, what is the IP address? So this particular the DNS service which is running here, that would send the IP address of that particular domain name. So the IP address of the burp, okay, this organization, okay, that would be sent, that would be mapped to the domain name sent by the application. So please understand the step to find the vulnerability, whether this particular application is vulnerable to this outbound SQL injection. What happens? Okay, using this burp suit tool, we can create a payload. That payload would generate a domain name actually. So that domain name is embedded into the payload and sent to the application. So when that domain name is part of the payload, the application would try to resolve the domain name with IP address. So the request would be sent to appropriate DNS servers. Finally, that request would end up here, because there is a DNS service. That DNS service resolve that domain name to a specific IP. Okay, so it would send a reply back to this application, the IP address of that particular domain name. Now the burp suite basically, okay, would ask the burp collaborator whether any such request has come to you. If it would confirm yes, a specific request has come from this application for the domain name which is generated by this tool, so it would send the information. So from that it can understand whether this particular application is vulnerable to this outbound injection or not. Basically this application shouldn't the web servers should be configured in such a manner that they are not allowed to interact with the external services like SMTP or DNS services or any other HTTP. Basically I mean HTTP is allowed to respond to the client, but some other application which is based on HTTP, it should be restricted. Okay, so suppose if that security mechanisms are not configured, I mean that the application is still allowed to interact with external DNS servers, then that could be misused to perform the outbound SQL injection. When this outbound SQL injection is performed, you can see here students, this is the domain name. Okay, it is generated by this tool. Okay, basically what happens, it is sent as a payload into the web application. So if that particular web application is vulnerable to the outbound SQL injection, so this payload, for example, sorry, this is the payload. This payload has the domain name also as part of it and has other malicious code. It would steal the password of the administrator and it would embed with the domain name which has to be resolved, and it would send that password embedded with this domain name and sent out from the web server. So basically this would steal the password and attach that password with the request which is sent to the burp collaborator. So when that request comes, by sniffing that one can understand what would be the password of the administrator. Okay, so this outbound SQL injection basically is very dangerous. It uses different communication channels. For example, you can see basically HTTP request goes, then the DNS, the application is sending a DNS request here. So different channels are used, request channel and attack or different channels. Whereas in the inbound here this one inbound SQL injection, the request and the attack both use the same channels, that is HTTP GET, HTTP POST. So the request and response are done using the same medium, same channels. Basically here you can see the request is sent using HTTP and the attack is to complete the attack, the DNS is used. So this is called the out of band SQL injection, and already we have discussed about the in-band. Okay, so in-band has error based and union based. You know what is error based? The error messages are not filtered by the web application and it is displayed on the client side. It would give a lot of information to the attackers, and a set of SQL select statements basically or combined concatenated using union operator. Then blind SQL injection, no error message displayed on the client side. So the attacker has to put a lot of effort in order to understand the attacker has to rely on the behavior of the web application based on true or false conditions returned, and also based on the time based delay which is forced on the database system using the payload. Then out of band SQL injection, it's a very dangerous one. Okay, it uses multiple channels of to initiate the attack. Okay, example DNS, HTTP, etc. Examples of SQL injection tools are SQL Map, BSQL Hacker, then JSQL injection, a Java tool to automatically find and exploit SQL injection vulnerabilities on remote servers, White Widow, and Havage. So these are the different SQL injection tools. In some operating systems, the in some database system, the passwords basically stored as a hash file, and for that they use a lot of functions, built-in functions or procedure, basically to store the password as hash values. In Microsoft SQL Server, the database system stores the credentials, usernames and passwords in a table called syslogin, and a built-in procedure or function used, and that is called pwd encrypt. If the attacker can successfully access these credentials in the hashed format, then they can try the brute force attack using the tools such as SQLBF and SQL Dictionary, SQL DICT. Using these tools, the attacker can try the brute force attack using the available dictionaries. How to secure the systems, now database systems. Here actually it is specific to Microsoft SQL Server. In Microsoft SQL Server, there are two types of authentication. One is called window authentication, another one is native SQL authentication or mixed mode authentication. Just assume in a network there is a domain which is configured using an Active Directory domain service. I hope most of you know what is a directory service. In your colleges, when you log in, okay, like example Sur College domain or Sohar or IBRI, you have a domain. So when you switch on the systems, you are entering the credentials. These credentials are authenticated by a domain controller, DC. Okay, so there is a domain server. So using the Kerberos protocol, the domain controller would authenticate our credentials. So if the authentication is successful, we are allowed to access the system in which we are basically trying to access. So this is called Windows authentication. Now another thing is, let us say in the domain there is a Microsoft SQL Server. Now already we have finished the domain authentication, and the administrators, they can configure in such a way that if the Windows authentication, if the domain authentication is successful, then using that authentication they can access the SQL Server, provided they have the permission, they have the provided they are authorized to access a specific resource. Such kind of authentication is called Windows authentication. Okay, it supports Kerberos protocol. It is highly secured. In case if there is no Active Directory domain service, then in that case you just have a standalone Microsoft SQL Server. You want to log in into the system, then the credentials has to be stored in the database system itself, and through the credentials which are supported by the database system SQL Server, the user has to log in. So that is called native SQL authentication. Also other name is mixed mode authentication. So as a security expert, okay, when you want to advise an organization regarding this, you can suggest, if they have the Active Directory domain service, you can ask them to go for Windows authentication. And in database systems, there are many roles available. One such role is called public role, and this role basically all the users, they are part of this public role. So these public roles, when you assign over a specific resource, over a specific table, you have to be very careful. You have to carefully configure the permissions, because all the users are part of the public role. Even the guest role, guest user, guest account, it is part of the public role. So when you give access of a specific resource in the database system, example, you are allowing the public role to access a specific table, you have to be very careful, because all the users by default they are in public role. Okay, even the guest account is part of that. So you have to think and take the decision wisely, so that you know, the unauthorized access is not taking place. Guest account, basically whether it is a server operating system or the database system, the guest account has to be disabled in order to improve the security. If a guest account exists at the database level, any login, even if it doesn't have explicit access to the database, can access, they can have the access to the database through the guest account. Because the guest account is a member of the public role, any user who access the database via the account, this account already has the permission of the public role. So what is the best option is to just to disable this account. So Microsoft SQL Server listens on port number TCP port 1433, and also it uses the UDP port 1434. So network scanning tools, if they want to detect the database systems in a particular network, they use this particular port, UDP port number 1434. And also there are documents which shows that attacks have been initiated through the port number, UDP port number 1434. So basically we have to secure these ports using proper network security mechanisms, which we have discussed here in this particular slide, firewall and intrusion detection system, in order to monitor and detect the malicious traffic which are coming to the port number 1434. So port number 1434 basically can be used by the people to enumerate the information about the database server. So basically the traffic to this particular port can be monitored, and the malicious traffic can be detected, and any such intrusions can be averted using the network security tools. And in general, what are the different other protection mechanism which we can employ to protect the database against different attacks? They are discussed here. Physical security, of course, there should be the data of an organization and data pertain to an individual is very important. The confidentiality, integrity of the data is very important. So we have to take utmost care to protect these security parameters. And of course the database server room in has to be actually protected, unauthorized access to these physical entities should be restricted actually. And also proper backup mechanism should be in place in case of any incident, unwanted incident like fire, okay, or any other incident. The data should be securely there should be a secured backup, and there should be a mechanism to retrieve the data from the backup. And the database systems as well as the operating system as well as the web servers, they have to be updated regularly, and they have to be patched up in case if they have any bugs. So the update process would remove the bugs by the process called patching. So this has to be done regularly. And also there should be a network protection mechanism using firewall, intrusion detection system, as just now I discussed in the previous slide. The UDP port 1434 is very important as far as the Microsoft SQL Server. Attackers can enumerate the data about the Microsoft SQL Server through this port number. Also it can be used to initiate the attack. So it has to be, the traffic to this particular port number has to be monitored. Then whether it is operating system or web server or database system, lot of features are available, lot of services are running. So we have to enable only the services which are essential. So we shouldn't be unnecessarily executing the unwanted services. So that would be decided by the database administrator, network administrator. So in coordination with each other, they would decide what are the essential services that has to be executed, so that restricting these services, the attack vectors can be reduced. And a lot of tools are available to check the vulnerabilities with the applications, web applications as well as the database systems. So these tools can be used to find out the vulnerabilities that exist with these systems. And the password, basically whether it is the default administrator account or any other user account, the password should be complex in nature. The password policies should be in place. Here also I want to go back to this particular slide. When we go for the Windows authentications, actually the domain controller enforces very strict password policies. Even the SQL Server implements password policies, but the password policies implemented by the Windows, Active Directory domain service, it's more sophisticated than the native SQL Server authentication. So like password complexity, password lockout, okay, so if someone enters wrong password for more than specified number of time, then the account would be locked, and like that you can configure the password policies. And the guest account, of course we have discussed earlier, it has to be removed, and there should be a regular backup using different RAID techniques to be in place to secure the data. With all these informations in this lecture, I conclude this lecture. Thank you very much.